You won't believe what someone tried to sell on Facebook Marketplace last week. A single, slightly chewed piece of gum. That's right, a used piece of gum, listed for $5 with a caption, "Lightly enjoyed, still has flavor." And somehow, that's not even the weirdest thing you'll hear today. Welcome to the wild, wonderful, and utterly bizarre world of Facebook Marketplace, where Americans have proven there's absolutely nothing they won't try to sell. From expired canned goods to haunted dolls, the creativity, or sheer audacity, of these listings will leave you equal parts amused and horrified. This isn't just about random junk, though. It's a window into the chaotic, entrepreneurial spirit of a nation where someone, somewhere, genuinely thought, you know what the world needs, a half-eaten sandwich framed as modern art. And what's truly shocking, some of these listings actually find buyers. That's right, people out there are paying real money for things like a mystery box of dirt or a ghost in a jar. It's proof that when it comes to capitalism, there are no rules, only opportunities. And today, we're diving headfirst into 29 of the most ridiculous, jaw-dropping listings that'll make you question humanity's collective sanity. But here's the thing, these aren't just random oddities. Each one tells a story. Maybe it's a desperate attempt to declutter, a misguided passion project, or someone's idea of performance art. Or maybe, just maybe, it's all part of a grand experiment to see how far people will go to turn trash into treasure. Whatever the reason, one thing's for sure, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Facebook Marketplace the same way again. So buckle up, because we're about to take a ride through the strangest corners of online selling, where the only limit is someone's imagination and their willingness to hit post. All right, let's kick things off with a listing so baffling, it makes you wonder if the seller was either a genius or just deeply confused. Picture this, a used toothbrush, bristles slightly frayed, with a faint hint of minty freshness still clinging to it, or so the seller claimed. The price, a cool $10. Now you might be thinking, who in their right mind would buy a stranger's toothbrush? But here's the kicker, the seller didn't just list it as is. Oh no, they framed it as a pre-loved oral care tool with proven durability, adding that it had been gently broken in for optimal brushing comfort. The comment section was pure gold. One person asked if it came with a certificate of authenticity, while another joked about whether the previous owner's dental records were included. But the real surprise, someone actually messaged the seller asking if they could negotiate the price down to $8. That's right, a bidding war nearly broke out over a toothbrush that had literally been in someone else's mouth. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't just the audacity of trying to sell it, but the psychology behind it. Was the seller testing the limits of human curiosity? Or were they genuinely convinced they'd found a market for second-hand dental hygiene? Either way, it's a perfect example of how Facebook Marketplace has become the Wild West of online selling, where even the most mundane or downright gross items can spark a bidding frenzy. And honestly, if someone's willing to pay for a used toothbrush, what won't people buy? If you thought the used toothbrush was pushing the boundaries of what counts as sellable, wait until you hear about the half-eaten bag of chips. That's right, someone actually listed a partially consumed snack with the bold claim that it was a rare, limited edition tasting experience. Priced at $7, the seller insisted the remaining chips had been carefully curated for optimal flavor balance, as if they were sommeliers of stale tortilla crumbs. The description went on to explain that the bag had only been opened 2 days prior, though they failed to mention whether those 2 days were spent in direct sunlight or tucked inside a gym bag. Now, you might assume this was a joke, but the seller's tone was deadly serious. They even included a disclaimer that the chips came from a pet-free, smoke-free home, as if hygiene was the only thing stopping potential buyers. The real kicker, the listing photos showed the bag half crumpled, with a few sad-looking chips clinging to the bottom like survivors of a snack apocalypse. And yet, against all logic, someone commented asking if the seller would consider shipping because apparently, paying for delivery on a handful of expired crumbs is a completely rational decision. What's fascinating here isn't just the absurdity of the listing itself, but the mindset behind it. Was this a desperate attempt to recoup $7 after realizing they didn't actually want the chips? Or was it a social experiment to see how far people would go for the illusion of exclusivity? Either way, it's a perfect case study in the psychology of online selling. People aren't just buying objects, they're buying stories, no matter how ridiculous. And in a world where limited edition can be slapped onto anything, even a half-eaten bag of chips suddenly feels like a collector's item. The irony, of course, is that this kind of listing thrives because of the very nature of Facebook Marketplace. It's a platform where the line between treasure and trash is blurry at best, and where the right buyer or the right sucker might just be one click away. So the next time you're scrolling through listings and stumble upon something utterly nonsensical, just remember, somewhere out there, a half-eaten bag of chips is waiting for its moment to shine. Just when you think Facebook Marketplace can't get any weirder, someone comes along selling a rock as the perfect pet. Not a pet rock from some novelty gift shop. No, this was an ordinary backyard stone listed for $15 with the description, "Extremely well-trained, never barks or scratches furniture." The seller went all in on the bit, claiming it was housebroken, hypoallergenic, and even great with kids. Photos showed the rock posed on a tiny dog bed, complete with a handwritten name tag that read Boulder. The reactions were priceless. One person asked if it came with vaccination records. Another demanded to know whether it was crate trained. A few even played along, leaving glowing reviews like 10 out of 10, best pet I've ever owned, didn't even shed. But here's the twist. Multiple people messaged the seller asking if they could meet Boulder before committing. That's right, they wanted a rock audition. What makes this listing so brilliant is how it exposes the absurd lengths people will go to anthropomorphize literally anything. The seller didn't just list a rock, they sold a story, a zero-maintenance companion with a personality. And in a world where people name their Roomba and cry over fictional character deaths, maybe it's not so surprising that someone would fall for it. After all, if a pet rock can go viral in the 1970s, why shouldn't Boulder have his moment in the spotlight? But the real question isn't whether rocks make good pets. It's why we keep convincing ourselves that the next bizarre listing must be a joke until someone actually buys it. Because in the end, Facebook Marketplace isn't just a platform, it's a mirror, reflecting back our collective willingness to believe that even a chunk of limestone might just be the companion we never knew we needed. Just when you thought Facebook Marketplace had exhausted all possible ways to monetize nothing, someone decided fresh air was the next big commodity. That's right, a listing appeared for a mason jar filled with 100% authentic countryside air, harvested from a pristine meadow at sunrise and sealed for maximum freshness. The seller's pitch read like a high-end skincare ad. Breathe in the purity of unspoiled nature, perfect for city dwellers missing the great outdoors or anyone tired of stale office air. The price $20 plus shipping, because apparently even oxygen isn't free these days. Now, you'd expect this to be a joke, but the seller doubled down in the comments. When someone asked how they'd verified the air's authenticity, the response was eerily confident. GPS coordinates of the harvest location available upon request. Another skeptic inquired about shelf life, to which the seller replied, best used within 6 months for peak crispness. And then came the real twist. Multiple people chimed in claiming they'd bought similar jars before, with one insisting it smelled like childhood vacations. The brilliance of this listing lies in its sheer audacity. It's not just selling air, it's selling nostalgia, a tangible connection to some idyllic fantasy of rolling hills and dew-kissed grass. In a world where people pay for virtual real estate in metaverses and bottled water from icebergs, why wouldn't someone monetize the breeze? The jar itself became a metaphor, a literal breath of escapism for anyone drowning in the mundane. But here's the kicker, it worked. The seller updated the listing a week later with a bold, sold-out banner, along with a promise to restock after the next air harvest season. Whether those buyers actually uncapped their jars and inhaled deeply or just wanted a conversation piece for their bookshelves, we'll never know. What we do know is this: on Facebook Marketplace, even the most intangible things, hope, nostalgia, or just a whiff of something greener, can be packaged, priced, and sold. And somehow, against all logic, there's always someone ready to click buy now. What's next? A Ziploc bag of sunset, a subscription box of morning dew. At this rate, nothing's off the table, because if there's one thing these listings prove, it's that value isn't about the product, it's about the story you wrap around it. And in the marketplace of the absurd, the best stories don't just sell, they breathe. Now, let's talk about the listing that redefined the word niche, a single, lone Lego brick. Not a rare collector's piece, not a discontinued color, just one standard red 2x4 brick listed for $12, the seller's justification. Perfect for completing your set without buying a whole new box. They even included a close-up photo of the brick perched dramatically on a velvet backdrop, as if it were some kind of miniature modern art installation. At first glance, this seems like pure absurdity. A brand new Lego set with hundreds of pieces might cost $40, meaning this single brick was priced at roughly a third of an entire box's worth. But here's where it gets interesting. The seller wasn't just selling plastic. They were selling convenience. Lego enthusiasts know the agony of losing one critical piece, the kind that halts an entire build. And while Lego's official replacement service is affordable, it's not instant. This seller positioned themselves as the Uber Eats of missing bricks, overpriced, yes, but available now. The comment section was a battlefield of logic versus desperation. One person crunched the numbers, pointing out that at this rate, a full set's worth of bricks would cost over $4,000. Another shot back, time is money, Karen. A nod to the impatient builders willing to pay a premium to avoid the wait. And then there were the conspiracy theorists, convinced this was a covert marketing stunt by Big Lego to normalize outrageous pricing. What makes this listing fascinating isn't the brick itself, but the psychology it exposes. We've all overpaid for something out of urgency, a last-minute charger at the airport, a bottle of water at a concert. This was just the Lego version of that instinct. The seller wasn't selling a product, they were selling a solution to frustration, wrapped in the tiniest possible package. And judging by the pending sale tag that appeared within hours, it worked. But the real irony, the brick was listed as like new, which raises so many questions. How does one lightly use a Lego brick? Was it previously part of a doomed spaceship, a castle that lost the war? The seller's silence on the brick's backstory only added to the mystique, and maybe that was the point. Because in the end, this wasn't about plastic. It was about the stories we attach to the smallest things, and the lengths we'll go to avoid admitting defeat to a missing piece. So the next time you're knee-deep in Lego chaos, remember, somewhere out there, a single brick is waiting to be your hero for $12 plus shipping. And whether that's a scam or a savior depends entirely on how badly you need to finish that Death Star. A used candle might sound like the most pointless thing you could try to sell, until you see the listing that called it pre-loved ambience in its purest form. This wasn't just a wax puddle with a wick nub, it was a story. The seller had burned it down to its last inch, then decided the remaining wax possessed a rare, moody glow perfect for intimate dinners or haunted house vibes. Priced at $8, the description insisted the candle had been cherished during many romantic evenings, which either meant it was a sentimental relic or the seller was really committed to the bit. The photos told their own tragicomic tale: a lopsided pillar candle, its sides dripped into abstract wax sculptures, sitting proudly on a lace doily as if it were a museum piece. Comments ranged from "Does it come with the ghosts of those romantic evenings?" to "I'll take it if you throw in the trauma." But the real surprise, multiple people asked about scent retention, because apparently the idea of paying for second-hand vanilla coconut fumes was a legitimate consideration. One particularly invested potential buyer even requested a video of the candle being lit to assess its final performance. What makes this listing so strangely compelling isn't just the goal of trying to monetize a candle's dying breath. It's the way the seller framed exhaustion as character. A new candle is a blank slate, but this one came with a backstory, a life lived, a vibe curated. In a world where Etsy sells cottagecore mystery dust, why wouldn't someone assign value to wax that's already set the mood? It's the ultimate test of how much nostalgia we're willing to buy. And here's the twist: it sold within 2 days. Maybe the buyer wanted a conversation starter. Maybe they believed in the candle's haunted house vibes. Or maybe they were just the kind of person who sees beauty in things others would toss, a philosophy that, on Facebook Marketplace, can turn even a melted candle into a hot commodity. Because when you think about it, we're all just one poetic listing away from convincing someone that our trash is their treasure. This candle wasn't just wax. It was proof that everything has a second act, even if that act involves sitting on a stranger's shelf, waiting to be lit one last time. Of all the bizarre listings that blur the line between marketplace and midnight horror story, nothing tops the certifiably haunted doll named Matilda. The seller didn't just offload a vintage toy, they spun a full Gothic tale claiming Matilda had belonged to a 19th century widow who'd imbued her with restless energy. The description read like a campfire ghost story. Her eyes follow you, objects move when she's in the room, last owner reported whispering at 3 a.m. And the piece de resistance, a blurred photo where the doll's face almost looked like it was smirking, or maybe that was just bad lighting. Priced at $150, a steal for a spirit conduit. According to the seller, the listing attracted 2 types of buyers: skeptics who came to mock and true believers who came to bid. One commenter demanded to know if Matilda came with an exorcism warranty, while another shared an impassioned testimonial about their own haunted teapot. But the real action happened in the DMs. The seller later revealed they'd received over 20 serious offers, including one from a paranormal investigator who wanted to document her activity, and another from a horror podcast host looking for a co-host with otherworldly charm. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't just the willingness to monetize a ghost story, it's how seriously people took it. The seller's genius was in the details. They'd included rules for Matilda's new owner: never place her facing a mirror, offer a drop of milk monthly, turning a creepy doll into an interactive experience. It wasn't just about owning an object, it was about inheriting a legend, and legends, as we know, are priceless. In the end, Matilda sold within 48 hours to a self-proclaimed spirit collector who proudly commented they'd give her a good home, or at least a dramatic one. Whether the doll was truly haunted or just a masterclass in marketing, one thing's certain: on Facebook Marketplace, even the afterlife has a price tag. And if you listen closely tonight, you might just hear the faint sound of Matilda's new owner frantically Googling how to unhaunt a bedroom. You might assume a banana peel belongs in the trash, or at best, a compost bin, but one seller saw dollar signs in that slippery browning crescent. Listed as abstract organic art for $12, the peel came with a hilariously pretentious description: a commentary on the fleeting nature of life captured in biodegradable form. Note the graceful decay of the stem, a metaphor for human fragility. Photos showed it arranged on a marble counter like a museum exhibit, with dramatic lighting accentuating every bruise and speckle. The comments erupted into pure chaos. One person asked if the peel was vegan-friendly art. Another demanded a certificate of authenticity to prove it wasn't just, well, Tuesday's breakfast remains. But the real stroke of genius, the seller claimed it was part of a limited series, implying there were more peels where this one came from. Cue the inevitable question: will you be releasing NFTs of these? What makes this listing so deliciously absurd isn't just the attempt to rebrand garbage as high art. It's the way it holds a mirror to the actual art world, where a taped banana once sold for 6 figures. The seller wasn't just selling a peel, they were selling a joke that doubled as social satire, and the best part, someone bought it, not for their art, but because they wanted to frame the screenshot of the listing as their piece of ironic decor. This peel did more than just rot. It proved that on Facebook Marketplace, even the most mundane objects can become cultural commentary if you're brave enough to call them art. And honestly, in a world where people pay millions for empty frames and invisible sculptures, maybe a $12 banana peel is the most honest deal of all. Because let's be real, if a peel can spark this much debate, what's next? An avocado pit labeled unrealized potential, a grape stem marketed as nature's minimalist jewelry. The possibilities are endless and utterly ridiculous, but that's the magic of this platform. It reminds us that value isn't inherent. It's assigned, often with a straight face and a clever caption. And sometimes all it takes is a little audacity to turn yesterday's snack into today's conversation piece. So next time you toss a banana peel, ask yourself, are you throwing away trash or a $12 masterpiece waiting to happen? On Facebook Marketplace, the answer might just depend on how good your storytelling skills are. A used tissue might seem like the ultimate unsellable item, until you stumble upon a listing that proudly advertises it as a rare celebrity artifact. That's right, someone listed a crumpled, slightly stained tissue for $25, claiming it had been used by a mystery lister at a red carpet event. The seller's pitch was equal parts absurd and oddly compelling. Own a piece of Hollywood history, this tissue may contain the DNA of fame, or at the very least, the remnants of a very expensive moisturizer. Photos showed the tissue delicately placed in a Ziploc bag, like some kind of bizarre forensic evidence, with a handwritten note that read, "Authenticity guaranteed, probably." The comment section was a mix of disgust and morbid curiosity. One person asked, does it come with a COA certificate of authenticity or just a code? Another joked, finally, my dream of owning a Kardashian snot can come true. But what really tipped the scales from joke to surreal reality? Multiple people messaged the seller asking for more details, like which celebrity might have used it or if there was a discount for bulk orders. Yes, someone actually inquired about buying multiple used tissues, as if they were starting a gallery of celebrity biological waste. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't just the audacity of trying to sell literal trash, it's the psychology behind why anyone would entertain the idea. In an era where autographed napkins and celebrity chewed gum fetch thousands at auctions, the tissue wasn't just gross, it was a possibility. The seller wasn't selling mucus, they were selling access, no matter how dubious. And in a world where people frame their first dollar or worship relics, maybe a $25 tissue isn't that far-fetched. The kicker: the listing disappeared after a week, not because it didn't sell, but because the seller marked it as pending pickup. Whether it was a prank gone too far or someone's bizarre collectible, we'll never know. But one thing's clear, on Facebook Marketplace, even the most disposable things can become coveted if you slap the right story on them. And if a used tissue can spark this much drama, imagine what's next: a half-empty water bottle labeled Celebrity Hydration Vessel, a lint roller sheet marketed as Fabric of the Stars. The possibilities are as endless as they are utterly ridiculous. Because when it comes to online selling, the line between treasure and trash isn't just blurry, it's whatever the boldest seller dares to claim it is. And somewhere out there, a used tissue is waiting for its moment in the spotlight. All it needs is the right caption, the right buyer, and maybe just a little bit of delusional confidence. A broken pencil might seem like the textbook definition of worthless, until you see how one seller spun it as minimalist genius. Listed for $3, this wasn't just a snapped in half no. 2. It was a deconstructed writing tool, complete with a description that could have been lifted from a modern art gallery. Witness the raw beauty of imperfection. This pencil has transcended its original form to become a statement on productivity, fragility, and the ephemeral nature of creation. Photos showed the two jagged halves arranged in a dramatic X shape against a black background, looking less like stationery and more like the aftermath of some tiny, violent office uprising. The comments oscillated between bafflement and reluctant admiration. One person wrote, "I'll take it if you throw in the existential crisis that clearly inspired this listing." Another asked if the graphite dust could be repurposed as avant-garde shadow pigment. But the real shocker, 3 people messaged the seller asking if they had more fragmented office supplies available, as if this were the opening chapter of some bizarre stationery-themed art movement. What makes this listing so strangely compelling isn't just the audacity of pricing trash, it's how it reframes destruction as potential. A new pencil is just a tool, but a broken one. That's a conversation starter. The seller wasn't selling a writing utensil, they were selling a metaphor wrapped in lead and yellow paint. In a world where shredder confetti collages sell for thousands, maybe a $3 broken pencil isn't outrageous, it's just ahead of the curve. And here's the kicker, the seller later updated the listing with a note saying the pencil had been upcycled into a mixed media project, complete with a photo of it glued to a canvas alongside what appeared to be a Starbucks stirrer and a single sequin. Whether this was satire or sincerity hardly mattered. The lesson was clear. On Facebook Marketplace, even failure has resale value if you're brave enough to call it art. So the next time your pencil snaps mid-sentence, don't toss it, list it, because somewhere out there a buyer is waiting to turn your frustration into their statement piece. And who knows, maybe your broken things are just someone else's breakthrough. Some listings push the boundaries of bad taste, and then there's the jar of toenail clippings. This wasn't just a casual oversight left in a medicine cabinet. It was a full mason jar, meticulously labeled Vintage 2022 Collection, with an asking price of $30. The listing photos showed the jar held at a flattering angle, sunlight glinting off the contents as if it were a rustic home decor piece rather than a biohazard waiting to happen. The seller's description walked a fine line between deadpan and disturbingly sincere. Harvested over 12 months of dedicated grooming, perfect for prank gifts, modern art projects, or anyone with a strong stomach and a sense of adventure. Now, let's address the obvious. Why was this a misguided attempt at shock art, like some twisted Damien Hirst knockoff, a revenge listing aimed at an unsuspecting enemy? Or just someone with a truly unique understanding of collectibles? The comment section veered between horrified and morbidly fascinated. One person asked, "Are these free-range organic clippings, or was there a growth hormone situation?" Another chimed in, "Do you offer a subscription service?" But the real mystery wasn't the humor, it was the handful of genuine inquiries. Someone actually messaged asking if the clippings were from a specific diet or lifestyle, as if gluten-free toenails might hold mystical properties. What makes this listing so uniquely grotesque isn't just the item itself, it's the sheer commitment to the bit. This wasn't a lazy post, it was curated. The seller specified the jar was sterilized, doubtful, and even included a Best By date more doubtful. They'd transformed something universally discarded into a product complete with imagined use cases. Need Halloween decor? Here's your witch's ingredients. Starting a podcast about weird obsessions, voila, instant merch. The audacity was almost admirable. And then came the twist. The seller updated the listing with "sale pending" just 3 days later. Whether it was a brave soul with a performance art thesis or a troll who'd accidentally found their niche, we'll never know. But one thing's certain, this jar didn't just contain toenails. It held a mirror up to the wildest corners of online selling, where even the most repulsive things can find a market if you package them with enough flair. Because let's face it, on Facebook Marketplace, the line between "what is this" and "how much" is thinner than the nail on your pinky toe. And somewhere out there, a person is unboxing their new jar with equal parts regret and curiosity, wondering if they've just won the internet or lost their dignity. Either way, they've certainly earned their place in the Hall of Fame of ridiculous listings, no pedicure required. If you thought selling rocks as pets was peak absurdity, buckle up for listing 12, a stick. Not just any stick, mind you, but a certified magic wand harvested from an ancient forest where the trees whisper secrets. The seller's description read like a rejected Harry Potter spin-off. This oak wand channels raw mystical energy. Ideal for beginners, may cause mild tingling or sudden clarity. Results not guaranteed, but also not guaranteed. Priced at $45, it came with a handwritten spellbook, 3 post-it notes with phrases like "abracadabra 2.0" and a solemn warning: "Do not use near Wi-Fi routers, interference reported." The photos were a masterclass in staging. The stick, slightly crooked with a single peeling strip of bark, was draped over a velvet cloth beside a handful of quartz crystals, as if they were its entourage. One close-up showcased a knothole described as its power conduit, while another showed it balanced on a pentagram drawn in what looked like eyeliner. The seller had clearly studied viral, mystic aesthetic trends and cranked them to 11, but here's where it got interesting. The comments weren't just mockery, they were a battlefield of belief. Skeptics asked for lab results. Can it at least pass a polygraph? While true believers demanded testimonials. Did it work for you? One person even shared a story about their aunt's healing stick, which apparently cured her lumbago until she lost it in a bingo hall. The seller, to their credit, leaned into the chaos, replying to doubts with cryptic non-answers like "magic is like Wi-Fi. You can't see it, but you'd complain if it was gone." What makes this listing unforgettable isn't just the audacity of slapping a magic label on backyard debris. It's the way it tapped into a very real market. People want to believe in enchantment. In an era where manifesting journals and healing crystals are billion-dollar industries, a $45 stick isn't a scam, it's a placeholder for hope. The seller wasn't selling wood, they were selling potential, wrapped in enough vagueness to let buyers project their own fantasies onto it, and the punchline. It sold not to a snickering skeptic, but to someone who left a glowing review 2 weeks later. "My cat hasn't puked on the rug since the stick arrived." Coincidence, you decide. Whether that was a joke or the birth of a new believer hardly matters. The listing proved that magic, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. And on Facebook Marketplace, even a twig can become a talisman if you spin the right story. Because in the end, this stick wasn't just a piece of tree. It was a Rorschach test for desperation, curiosity, and our collective hunger for wonder in a world that feels increasingly predictable. And somewhere out there, a person is gently waving their wand at a dying houseplant, whispering, "Grow, darn you," with the solemn faith of a medieval alchemist. That's not just commerce, it's performance art. If you've ever looked under your couch and thought, "This dust is too valuable to vacuum," then listing 13 was made for you. Someone actually listed a Ziploc bag of household dust for $8, marketing it as vintage particulate matter collected from a home with character. The description was a masterpiece of deadpan absurdity. Each speck tells a story of shedding pets, forgotten snacks, and the slow passage of time. perfect for art projects, pranks, or hauntingly realistic set decor. Photos showed the bag held up to sunlight like a prospector's gold dust, with flecks of lint and what might have been a single eyelash floating dramatically inside. The comments section oscillated between disbelief and reluctant admiration. One person asked, "Is this from a smoke-free home, or is there a chance it's celebrity dust?" Another offered to trade a slightly used air filter for it, but the real surprise came when multiple people messaged the seller asking for custom dust-specific requests included dust from a bookshelf, extra wisdom vibes, and cat hair preferred for texture. Suddenly, this wasn't just a joke, it was a bespoke service for people who apparently believed household debris carried vibes. What makes this listing so strangely compelling is how it exposes our collective soft spot for nostalgia. The seller wasn't just hawking dirt, they were selling time packaged in a sandwich bag. In an era where Grandma's cookie jar sells for hundreds and vintage Pyrex sparks bidding wars, why wouldn't someone pay for dust that might have once belonged to a mid-century rotary phone? It's the ultimate low-effort relic, requiring no storage space or authentication, just a straight face and a creative backstory. And here's the twist, the listing disappeared after a week with a simple sold update. No fanfare, no follow-up review. Was it a prankster who'd punked their roommate, an art student constructing a commentary on consumerism, or just someone who realized that on Facebook Marketplace, even the most ephemeral things can become commodities if you label them vintage? This bag of dust did more than gather under furniture. It gathered questions like, if we're willing to buy strangers' dust, what won't we monetize? And more importantly, what's lurking under your fridge right now that could be someone else's $8 treasure? Because in the end, this listing wasn't about the dust. It was about the delightful absurdity of a platform where one person's "you" is another's "add to cart." And somewhere out there, a Ziploc bag of someone's DNA is waiting for its turn in the spotlight, proof that in capitalism's wildest corners, even particles have potential. Listing 14 makes you question not just the limits of what people will sell, but the limits of human dignity itself. A used Q-tip displayed like some kind of modern art relic. The seller didn't just toss it in a bag, they mounted it on a tiny easel photographed under soft lighting and listed it for $9 as a gently used personal care artifact. The description was a masterclass in euphemism. One careful owner, ideal for collectors of the intimate and ephemeral, or anyone seeking a bold conversation starter. Close-up shots revealed well. Let's just say the swab had clearly seen things no cotton bud should ever witness. Reactions ranged from horrified fascination to outright existential confusion. One commenter asked, "Is this performance art, or did we finally peak as a species?" Another demanded to know if it came with a disclaimer and a hazmat suit. But the real head-scratcher, 3 separate people messaged the seller asking if it was from a celebrity, proving once again that fame can apparently sanctify even the most unthinkable items. The seller, doubling down, replied, "All I can say is this Q-tip has been in the presence of greatness," leaving everyone to wonder whether that meant a Grammy winner's ear canal or just someone who'd once stood near a Times Square billboard. What makes this listing so bizarrely compelling isn't the item itself, it's the brazen refusal to acknowledge how deeply wrong it is. The seller didn't just list trash, they curated an experience, framing bodily waste as a collectible with all the gravitas of a rare coin. In a world where reality TV stars sell their bathwater, maybe a $9 Q-tip isn't shocking, it's just the next logical step in the everything is merch apocalypse. And then came the twist. The listing vanished after 48 hours with a terse sold to a private collector. Whether that collector was a microbiologist, a troll, or someone with a very specific fetish, we'll never know. But one thing's certain, on Facebook Marketplace, even your earwax has a target demographic. And if that doesn't make you rethink humanity's trajectory, Just wait, listing 15 involves a half-empty tube of toothpaste and the phrase pre-brushed freshness. Buckle up. A crushed, empty soda can might seem like the very definition of worthless unless, of course, you frame it as a rare vintage artifact. That's exactly what one seller did, listing a flattened Coke Zero can for $20 with a description that read like a museum curator's fever dream. Discontinued design from the short-lived 2017 rebrand. A must-have for serious beverage historians or minimalist decor enthusiasts. The photos showed the can artfully posed on a marble slab, its dented sides catching the light just so, as if it were some kind of industrial sculpture. The seller's pitch leaned hard into the absurdity, claiming the can had been rescued from a landfill-bound fate and was now a testament to consumer culture's fleeting trends. They even included a backstory about how this particular design was pulled after just 3 months due to public outcry over the font, a claim that upon fact-checking turned out to be entirely fabricated. But accuracy wasn't the point. This listing wasn't selling aluminum, it was selling mythology, the kind of niche nostalgia that turns trash into treasure if you squint hard enough. The comments section was a mix of bafflement and grudging respect. One person asked, "Does it come with the original soda or is that extra?" Another quipped, "Finally, my Apocalypse wall art collection is complete." But the real surprise, several Coke memorabilia collectors actually engaged, debating whether the can's barely visible barcode made it common or truly rare. One user even referenced a 2014 Pepsi can that sold at auction for over $2,000. Proving that somewhere, someone was willing to pay stupid money for carbonated history. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't just the audacity of pricing trash, it's how it exposes the psychology of collecting. A new can is just a drink holder, but a discontinued one. Suddenly, it's a relic, a tiny time capsule of corporate decisions and consumer whims. The seller understood that value isn't about the object, it's about the story you wrap around it. And in a world where people collect everything from Beanie Babies to crypto art, why wouldn't a dented Coke can have its moment? The kicker: the listing sold within a week to someone who left a 5-star review. Perfect addition to my corporate regrets shelf. Whether they were a serious collector or just someone with a killer sense of irony, one thing's certain. On Facebook Marketplace, even emptiness has value if you package it with enough panache. So next time you toss a soda can, take a closer look. That crumpled piece of nothing might just be someone else's $20 masterpiece, because in the end, rarity isn't about what's in the can. It's about what you pretend was. A single sock is the universal symbol of laundry day defeat, so of course, someone tried to sell one on Facebook Marketplace for $7. But this wasn't just any sock. According to the listing, it was a rare solo performance footwear from a luxury brand you've definitely heard of, name faded from wear. The seller's description was a masterclass in spin, perfect for avant-garde fashionistas or as a symbol of life's unfinished journeys, pairs well with existential dread. Photos showed the sock, slightly stretched at the heel with a faint coffee stain near the toe, draped over a bonsai tree like some kind of textile modern art. The comments section erupted into pure poetry. One person asked if the sock came with a backstory or just unresolved trauma. Another offered to trade it for a single earring they'd found in a parking lot, calling it a metaphor for their love life. But the real stroke of genius, the seller claimed the sock had good energy because it had once been worn during a life-changing karaoke performance of Don't Stop Believin'. Suddenly, this wasn't just laundry room debris, it was a relic of personal triumph. What makes this listing so oddly profound isn't the sock itself. It's the audacity to assign meaning to something we've all tossed in the mismatched drawer with a sigh. The seller understood that nostalgia isn't about the object, it's about the stories we glue to it. And in a world where people auction celebrity-used napkins, why shouldn't a sock with dubious karaoke credentials have value? The kicker, two people actually fought over it. One messaged, "I'll take it if it's the left sock. My collection is unbalanced." The other argued, "Stains add character. I'll pay extra." In the end, the sock sold for the original $7 to someone who left a review calling it a poignant reminder that we're all just one half of a pair searching. Whether that buyer was a philosopher or just a really dedicated troll, one thing's clear. On Facebook Marketplace, even loneliness is marketable. So next time you lose a sock, don't mourn. List it, because somewhere out there, a person is waiting to turn your laundry fail into their emotional support footwear. And honestly, in a world this unpredictable, maybe that's the most relatable listing of all. The listing for the so-called cursed painting looked like something ripped straight from a horror movie script. The seller didn't just offload an old canvas. They spun a full-blown supernatural thriller, claiming the piece had moved on its own in previous owners' homes and was possibly responsible for 3 separate cases of insomnia. The painting itself was an eerie, washed-out landscape, a foggy forest with a shadowy figure barely visible between the trees. But the real star was the backstory. According to the seller, it had been purchased at a garage sale in the 1980s by a man who mysteriously lost his voice for 6 months after hanging it in his bedroom. Subsequent owners reportedly experienced unexplained cold drafts, visions of the figure stepping out of the frame, and one particularly dramatic claim of spontaneous hair loss. Priced at $200, a bargain for a genuine paranormal artifact, the listing came with a handwritten note from the seller. "I'd keep it, but my therapist said no." The comment section was a mix of terrified intrigue and skeptical snark. One person asked, "Does the curse come with a warranty, or is it more of an as-is situation?" Another joked, "Will you take $50 if I promise to display it in my mother-in-law's guest room?" But beneath the humor, something fascinating happened. Multiple people shared their own cursed object stories, from a music box that played by itself at midnight to a rug that always felt damp no matter where it was stored. The seller, sensing the momentum, updated the listing with testimonials from friends who'd allegedly visited their home and felt watched by the painting. What makes this listing so compelling isn't just the campy horror tropes, it's how it taps into a very real cultural obsession with haunted objects. In an era where museums display debug boxes and podcasts dissect cursed jewelry, a $200 painting isn't just decor, it's a provocation. The seller wasn't selling pigments and canvas, they were selling a narrative, one that let buyers flirt with danger from the safety of their shopping cart. And flirt they did. The painting sold within 48 hours to an anonymous buyer who left a 5-star review simply stating, "It hasn't killed me yet." Was it a genuine paranormal artifact or a masterclass in marketing? The truth hardly matters. What's undeniable is this: on Facebook Marketplace, even fear is commodified. So the next time you stumble upon a haunted lamp or a possessed doll, ask yourself, are you buying an object or are you buying the thrill of the story? And more importantly, how much is that thrill worth to you? Because in the end, every cursed listing is just a mirror, reflecting our collective love for the things that go bump in the night and the brave souls willing to pay for the privilege of hearing them. A handful of sand seems like the ultimate symbol of worthlessness until you see the listing that called it authentic coastal memory particles. Priced at $12, this wasn't just any sand. It was hand-harvested at sunrise from a secret California beach where the waves whisper secrets. The seller's description was equal parts poetic and shameless. Each grain holds the energy of 1,000 tides, perfect for memory jars, art projects, or anyone who misses the ocean but hates actual travel. Photos showed the sand cupped in someone's palm like a precious artifact, with a seashell fragment strategically placed for vibes. The reactions were a mix of eye rolls and unexpected intrigue. One commenter asked, "Is this sand from a celebrity beach? Like, did a Kardashian's flip-flop graze it?" Another demanded a certificate of beachness to prove it wasn't just scooped from a sandbox. But here's where it got wild. People started sharing their own sand stories in the comments. One person reminisced about stealing sand from Hawaii as a kid. "My mom made me mail it back." While another admitted to keeping a vial of sand from their wedding venue. Suddenly, this wasn't just a joke, it was a movement. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't the sand itself, it's the way it taps into our obsession with tangible nostalgia. The seller wasn't selling minerals, they were selling time travel, a way to bottle the feeling of salt air and bare feet without ever leaving your couch. In a world where people pay for celebrity bathwater and billionaires chase immortality, $12 for a memory isn't just reasonable, it's practically a bargain. And then came the plot twist. The seller sold 3 batches in a week, not to pranksters but to real buyers who left heartfelt reviews like, "Now my anxiety jar has beach vibes, and I sprinkled it over my desk plant, it's thriving." Whether those reviews were satire or sincere hardly matters. The lesson was clear. On Facebook Marketplace, even the most mundane things become magic if you wrap them in the right story. Because let's face it, we're all just people clutching metaphorical handfuls of sand, trying to hold onto moments that slip through our fingers. And if someone's willing to pay for the illusion, who's to say it's not real? After all, the best souvenirs aren't the ones you buy. They're the ones that make you feel something, even if that something is just wondering whether you, too, could monetize your next trip to the beach. A used Band-Aid might seem like the ultimate unsellable item, until you stumble upon a listing that proudly advertises it as a pre-loved medical relic. That's right, someone posted a slightly frayed, discolored adhesive bandage for $5, complete with a description that read, "Gently worn for 2 days during a minor kitchen mishap." Contains traces of resilience and possibly a story worth telling. Photos showed the Band-Aid carefully stretched across a piece of parchment paper like some kind of modern art exhibit, with a dramatic shadow effect suggesting it had been through a battle. The comment section descended into chaos almost instantly. One person asked, "Does it come with the original wound?" Another quipped, "Finally, my tragic first aid scrapbook has its centerpiece." But the real jaw-dropper, someone actually messaged the seller asking if they'd consider a bulk discount for multiple used Band-Aids, as if they were starting a museum of human clumsiness. The seller, doubling down, replied, "Each one tells a unique story. Let me know your preferred level of life experience for customization." What makes this listing so baffling isn't just the audacity of trying to sell literal medical waste, it's the way the seller framed it as a collectible. This wasn't just a sticky strip of fabric, it was a testament to survival, a tiny badge of honor for someone's failed attempt at slicing vegetables. In a world where people auction celebrity-chewed gum and lockets of enchanted hair, maybe a $5 Band-Aid isn't even that weird. After all, if pain can be monetized through memoirs and trauma TikToks, why wouldn't a Band-Aid have resale value? The seller's genius, they leaned into the absurdity with such conviction that it almost felt legit. When pressed about hygiene, they claimed the Band-Aid had been air-dried for optimal preservation, whatever that means. Another skeptic asked if it came with a certificate of authenticity, to which the seller shot back, "Do you ask for one when you buy vintage socks?" Touché, and then plot twist, the listing disappeared after 3 days with a triumphant "sold" update. Was it a prankster who'd punked their roommate, a conceptual artist making a statement about consumerism, or just someone who realized that on Facebook Marketplace, even the most disposable things become valuable if you slap the right adjective on them? Because here's the thing, this Band-Aid wasn't just a listing. It was a mirror reflecting our collective willingness to assign meaning to the meaningless. In the end, it doesn't matter if the buyer was a troll or a true believer. What matters is that somewhere out there, a used Band-Aid is now someone's cherished possession, proof that in the wild west of online selling, even scars or the things that cover them have a price tag. And honestly, that's a sticking plaster on the wound of capitalism if we've ever seen one. The listing for a genuine ghost in a jar was the kind of absurdity that made you question whether the seller was a comic genius or just deeply committed to their bit. The jar itself, a standard mason jar with a rusted lid, was photographed against a dimly lit backdrop, its interior suspiciously empty to the naked eye. But according to the seller, that emptiness was the whole point. The description read like a paranormal investigator's fanfiction, captured during a solo seance in a reportedly haunted 19th century farmhouse. This spirit is shy but responsive. Knock 3 times and wait for the faintest mist to form. Results may vary. Comes with a handwritten care guide to prevent accidental releases. Priced at $75, it was marketed as the ultimate low-maintenance pet. No feeding, no walking, just occasional whispered compliments to keep it from getting restless. The comments section was a masterclass in collective imagination. One person asked, "Does it come with a return policy if the ghost doesn't like me?" Another offered to trade a lightly cursed music box for it, but the real spectacle was the seller's unwavering dedication to the bit. When skeptics demanded proof, they doubled down. This isn't a science lab, it's a leap of faith. But for the record, my cat hisses at the jar every Tuesday at 3 p.m., and that's as close to a testimonial as you'll get. They even claim the ghost had a name, Ezekiel, but he prefers Zeke, and a backstory involving a tragic unrequited love with a Victorian chambermaid. Suddenly, this wasn't just a jar, it was a soap opera in glass. What made this listing unforgettable wasn't just the creativity, it was the way it exposed how easily mystery translates to value. The seller wasn't selling a jar, they were selling a possibility, the thrill of wondering, what if? In a world where people spend thousands on ghost hunting equipment and herb haunted houses, $75 for a hypothetical specter isn't just reasonable, it's a steal. And sure enough, the jar sold within hours to someone who left a glowing review. "Zeke made my bathroom mirror fog up last night, 5 stars for ambience." Whether that was a placebo effect or pure theater, it didn't matter. The buyer got their story, the seller got their cash, and Facebook Marketplace got another legendary entry in its Museum of the Bizarre. Because here's the thing, this ghost wasn't in the jar. It was in the idea of the jar, the collective suspension of disbelief that turns empty space into something magical. And in a marketplace where people buy rocks as pets and jars of countryside air, why wouldn't a ghost be the next hot commodity? After all, the best transactions aren't about what's real. They're about what we're willing to pretend could be. A wilted houseplant might seem like the textbook definition of a lost cause until you see the listing that called it a low-commitment green companion. This wasn't just a sad, drooping pothos. It was a pre-loved botanical project with a description that walked the fine line between optimistic and delusional. "Thriving is overrated," the seller declared. "This plant is perfect for those who want the aesthetic of greenery without the pressure of keeping it alive." Think of it as a metaphor for resilience, or maybe just a really good excuse to say you tried. Priced at $15, the listing photos showed the plant slumped in its pot, leaves curled and browning at the edges, bathed in the kind of dramatic lighting usually reserved for Renaissance paintings. The comments were a mix of pity and reluctant admiration. One person asked, "Does it come with a eulogy draft or is that extra?" Another offered to trade it for a mostly dead succulent they'd forgotten to water for 6 months. But the real twist, the seller leaned into the plant's tragic backstory, claiming it had survived 2 cross-country moves, a breakup, and a cat with a vendetta. Suddenly, this wasn't just a dying plant, it was a survivor, a leafy underdog with a tale to tell. And in a world where people name their cars and cry over expired yogurt cultures, why wouldn't someone empathize with a plant that had clearly been through it? What makes this listing so oddly compelling isn't the plant itself, it's the way it reframes failure as charm. The seller wasn't selling foliage, they were selling permission to suck at plant parenthood, to embrace the beauty of imperfection, to laugh in the face of Instagram's unrealistic houseplants mom standards. In an era where easy care plants still somehow end up as compost, maybe a $15 wilted pothos isn't a scam. Maybe it's a public service, and then came the plot twist: someone bought it. Not as a joke, but as a gift for their therapist, who apparently appreciated metaphors about growth and patience. The seller even threw in a handwritten care guide that read, Step 1, lower your expectations. Step 2, admire its bravery. Whether the plant ever perked up is irrelevant. What matters is that in the wild, untamed jungle of Facebook Marketplace, even the most hopeless cases can find love, or at least a willing participant in their delusion. Because let's be honest, we've all been that plant at some point. A little worse for wear, counting on someone to see the potential in our droopy, brown-edged selves. And if that's not a metaphor for the human condition, well, maybe it's just a really bad deal on a houseplant. Either way, it's sold, and somewhere out there, a therapist's office is now home to the world's most relatable decor. A rusty paperclip might be the last thing you'd expect to see on Facebook Marketplace until you stumble upon listing 22, where someone proudly marketed a single, slightly bent paperclip as a rare vintage office relic. The seller's description was a masterclass in absurd specificity, circa early 2000s, possibly used in a corporate merger or a middle school book report. Notice the elegant patina of time and the slight curve suggesting years of dutiful document service. Photos showed the paperclip artfully arranged on a velvet-lined jewelry tray, lit from above like a museum artifact. With a close-up of its unique structural imperfections, read, it was bent. The comments section oscillated between admiration for the seller's audacity and existential questions about humanity's trajectory. One person asked, does it come with a certificate proving it once held together someone's tax returns? Another quipped, finally, my antique desk essentials collection can begin. But the seller's genius was in their unwavering commitment to the bit. When skeptics asked how they'd verified the paperclip's vintage status, the response was deadpan. The oxidation pattern matches pre-2010 office supplies, and the bend suggests it was stressed by at least 3 quarterly reports. Suddenly, this wasn't just scrap metal, it was a historical document in wire form. What makes this listing so hilarious isn't just the item itself, it's the way it holds a mirror to actual collector culture. In a world where people auction vintage lunchboxes and 90s tech manuals, why wouldn't a paperclip have nostalgic value? The seller understood that the line between junk and collectible is just a story waiting to be told. And in the case of this humble office supply, the story was equal parts satire and social commentary. The kicker, someone bought it for $8. The buyer's review was a single line, perfect addition to my capitalism's unsung heroes shadow box. Whether they were a comedian, a hipster, or just someone with a deep appreciation for irony, one thing's certain. On Facebook Marketplace, even the most mundane objects can become icons if you're brave enough to call them vintage. And honestly, in an era where people pay for NFTs of nothing, maybe a tangible piece of office drudgery is the real bargain. Because let's face it, we've all clutched a paperclip in a moment of boredom, reshaping it into a makeshift hook or fidget toy. This listing just took that universal experience and slapped a price tag on it. And somewhere out there, that paperclip is now displayed like a trophy, a tiny monument to the absurdity of assigning meaning to the meaningless. Which, when you think about it, might just make it the most honest artifact of our time. A used tea bag might seem like the ultimate symbol of disposability, until you see the listing that called it a pre-steeped mindfulness experience. Priced at $5, this wasn't just a soggy Lipton tag dangling from a string. It was a curated moment of calm, complete with a description that verged on spiritual. Each sip has been infused with intention, the seller claimed. This bag has known the quiet joy of rainy afternoons and the deep thoughts of solo kitchen contemplation. Perfect for those who want the essence of tea without the effort of brewing. Photos showed the wrinkled bag draped over the edge of a chipped mug, backlit to highlight every frayed fiber as if it were some kind of organic sculpture. The comment section erupted into a debate about whether this was satire or sincerity. One person asked, "Does it come with the original drinker's existential crisis, or is that sold separately?" Another offered to trade a half-burned scented candle for it, calling it a fair exchange of depleted vibes, but the seller's commitment to the bit was unparalleled. When pressed about hygiene, they doubled down. The tannins act as a natural preservative, and the bag has been air-dried to maintain its aromatic integrity. They even suggested framing it as a reminder to slow down, because nothing says zen like a decomposing tea bag under glass. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't the item itself. It's the audacity to assign meaning to something we've all tossed without a second thought. The seller wasn't just peddling trash, they were selling nostalgia in string form, a tactile memory of moments most of us wouldn't bother to remember. In a world where people pay for celebrity bathwater and jars of forest air, why wouldn't a used tea bag have value? It's the ultimate test of how much we're willing to pay for the idea of an experience we could have had for free. And then came the twist. The listing sold within 24 hours. The buyer left no review, leaving everyone to wonder whether they'd purchased it as a joke, a conversation piece, or just maybe as a genuine token of someone else's quiet morning. Because let's face it, in the chaos of modern life, even the most mundane objects can become relics if they're tied to a moment of peace, and if that moment costs $5. Well, that's capitalism with a side of chamomile. So the next time you dunk a tea bag, ask yourself, are you just making a drink, or are you creating a future collectible? On Facebook Marketplace, the answer might depend on how good your storytelling is and how desperately someone out there is chasing the ghost of your tranquility. An empty chip bag might seem like the epitome of worthless trash until you stumble upon the listing that declared it a rare vintage snack artifact. This wasn't just any crumpled wrapper. It was a limited edition bag from a discontinued flavor of Doritos, meticulously flattened and displayed like a precious manuscript. The seller's description was a masterclass in hype. Own a piece of snack history. This 2017 Blazin' Buffalo and Ranch bag was part of a test market run that lasted only 6 weeks. Few survived, and even fewer remain in this pristine, empty condition. Photos showed the bag ironed smooth under glass, its logo gleaming as if it were a misplaced Picasso. The comments section oscillated between awe and disbelief. One person asked, "Does it still smell like regret and crushed dreams?" Another demanded proof of authenticity, to which the seller replied, "The grease stains are original, no reproductions here." But the real spectacle, genuine chip memorabilia collectors swooping in to debate its rarity. One user referenced a 2019 auction where an unopened bag of Crystal Pepsi-era Doritos sold for over $400, sparking a heated thread about the rising value of snack nostalgia. Suddenly, this wasn't just garbage, it was a blue-chip investment in junk food heritage. What makes this listing so bizarrely compelling isn't just the audacity, it's how it taps into the very real world of eccentric collectibles. In an era where people hoard Beanie Babies and limited edition Starbucks cups, why wouldn't a discontinued chip bag have value? The seller understood that scarcity breeds obsession, and obsession breeds buyers. They even threw in a certificate of emptiness, a tongue-in-cheek nod to the absurdity that somehow made it feel more legitimate. And then came the twist. 3 people battled over it in the DMs. One offered $20, citing their Museum of Snack Culture. Another countered with $30, claiming they'd once worked on the Doritos marketing team, unverified. The winner, a self-proclaimed flavor archaeologist who left a review calling it the crown jewel of my junk food archives. Whether it's a commentary on consumerism or just proof that people will monetize anything, this listing did more than sell a bag, it sold a mythology. And somewhere out there, that crumpled wrapper is now framed on a wall, a crispy testament to the fact that in the marketplace of the absurd, even air has value if you call it limited edition. Because let's face it, in a world where we throw away priceless moments but cling to worthless objects, maybe the real treasure was the existential crisis we bought along the way. A half-empty water bottle might seem like the kind of thing you'd toss without a second thought until you see the listing that called it pre-hydrated for your convenience. This wasn't just any abandoned aquafina, it was a gently consumed bottle priced at $4 with a description that blurred the line between laziness and innovation. Why waste time filling it yourself, the seller argued. This bottle comes pre-seasoned with optimal hydration levels, just grab and go. Photos showed the bottle casually perched on a car dashboard, sunlight glinting through the water like some kind of minimalist still life, while the caption insisted it had been stored in a climate-controlled environment. Read their cup holder. The reactions were a mix of bewildered admiration and outright disgust. One commenter asked, "Does it come with the original drinker's backwash, or is that a premium feature?" Another offered to trade a half-eaten granola bar, calling it a fair swap of partially enjoyed snacks. But the real surprise came when the seller doubled down in the replies, claiming the water had been enhanced with positive affirmations during consumption. Suddenly, this wasn't just leftovers, it was a beverage with a backstory, a liquid testament to someone's morning commute or gym session. And in a world where people pay for celebrity-endorsed coconut water, why wouldn't pre-sipped H2O have market value? What makes this listing so bizarrely compelling isn't the water itself, it's the sheer audacity to frame waste as a service. The seller wasn't selling hydration, they were selling convenience, no matter how dubious. In an era where meal kits deliver pre-chopped onions and apps charge extra to skip ads, maybe a half-drunk water bottle is just the next logical step in our quest to outsource even the tiniest tasks. The genius was in the details. They'd specified the water was filtered through a name-brand pitcher, as if that somehow sanitized the fact that a stranger's saliva might be floating in it. And then, because this is Facebook Marketplace, someone actually bought it. The buyer's review was a single cryptic line, "Tastes like victory." Whether they were a troll, a performance artist, or just someone who really hated unscrewing bottle caps, one thing's certain. In the grand bazaar of online absurdity, even laziness has a price tag. And honestly, in a world where we'll pay extra for pre-peeled bananas, maybe we're all just one step away from paying for the privilege of not finishing our own drinks. Because here's the truth, this bottle wasn't just half empty. It was half full of something far more valuable: delusional confidence. And on Facebook Marketplace, that's the most renewable resource of all. A hairbrush might seem like an odd candidate for paranormal activity until you stumble upon the listing that swore it was, haunted by the spirit of a flamboyant jazz-age socialite. This wasn't just any hairbrush, it was a vintage silver-plated model tarnished with age, its bristles slightly frayed as if they'd been tugged by impatient spectral fingers. The seller's description was a full-blown seance in text form. This brush moves on its vanity at night. It's been known to play faint strains of Sweet Georgia Brown when no one's nearby. Previous owner claimed it styled her hair with ghostly precision after midnight. Priced at $90, it came with a handwritten note from the seller. "I'd keep it, but my hair's never looked better, and I'm starting to find that unsettling." The photos were equal parts eerie and absurd. One showed the brush perched on a lace doily, positioned just so to catch a beam of moonlight. Another featured a blurry close-up of the handle where the seller had circled a smudge and labeled it possible ectoplasm residue. The piece de resistance, a screenshot of a voice memo allegedly capturing the ghost's whispered critique. "Darling, your part is crooked." Comments ranged from terrified to theatrical. One person asked, "Does the ghost approve of dry shampoo, or is she a purist?" Another offered to trade a lightly cursed hand mirror, claiming it showed glimpses of a man in a bowler hat. But the real drama unfolded when a self-proclaimed paranormal investigator chimed in, demanding spectral credentials. Has it been authenticated by a medium, or are we just taking the brush's word for it? The seller, unfazed, replied, "The only validation you need is the chill down your spine when it glides through your hair by itself." What makes this listing so captivating isn't just the campy ghost story, it's how it plays into our fascination with objects that feel alive. In a world where people buy haunted dolls and possessed paintings, a $90 hairbrush isn't just a grooming tool, it's a character, a flapper-era diva trapped in silver plating. The seller wasn't selling bristles and tarnish, they were selling a performance, a chance to invite a little drama into your daily routine. And the twist. It sold within a day. The buyer left a review that read, "Arrived smelling like gardenias and disapproval, 5 stars for authenticity." Whether they were a true believer or just a collector of the bizarre, one thing's certain, on Facebook Marketplace, even the afterlife has a sense of humor and a killer blowout. Because here's the truth, a haunted hairbrush isn't about the ghost. It's about the thrill of wondering, the fun of pretending, and the undeniable charm of a story that's just too good to fact-check. And somewhere out there, a jazz-age specter is rolling her eyes at your split ends, whispering, "Darling, really?" into the void. A single Cheerio might seem like the ultimate symbol of breakfast futility until you read the listing that called it a minimalist culinary masterpiece. This wasn't just any lonely oat circle, it was a rare, unbroken specimen presented on a pristine white plate like a Michelin-starred amuse-bouche, priced at a bold $3. The seller's description was a tongue-in-cheek ode to simplicity. Savor the essence of morning nostalgia without the commitment of a full bowl. This Cheerio has been hand-selected for its perfect toast-to-golden ratio and its haunting loneliness, ideal for collectors of the absurd or anyone who's ever felt like the last piece left in the box. Photos showcased the Cheerio under dramatic lighting, its tiny paws visible in close-up, with a ruler beside it for scale as if it were a precious artifact. The comments section erupted into a symphony of mock reverence. One person asked, "Is this from a limited edition batch or just a rogue from a generic box?" Another offered to trade a slightly crushed Fruit Loop as a companion piece, but the seller's commitment to the bit was unshakable. When someone questioned the Cheerio's freshness, they replied, "This isn't just cereal, it's a time capsule." The crispness suggests it avoided milk contact, making it a rare dry survivor. They even claimed it had been stored in a humidity-controlled drawer, aka their kitchen cabinet, to preserve its textural integrity. What makes this listing so hilarious isn't just the item, it's the way it exaggerates our obsession with scarcity and curation. In a world where people auction unopened Beanie Babies and vintage action figures, why shouldn't a single Cheerio have value? The seller tapped into the same psychology that drives collectors to hoard seemingly worthless items, the thrill of owning something technically irreplaceable. After all, no two Cheerios are exactly alike, right? Okay, maybe they are, but that's beside the point. The real punchline: someone bought it. The buyer's review was a masterpiece of deadpan. Displayed it in a shadow box labeled "Loneliest Breakfast." Guests either laugh or cry. Worth every penny. Whether they were a comedian, an art student, or just a person with $3 to burn, one thing's clear. On Facebook Marketplace, even the most ephemeral things become legends if you sell them with a straight face. Because here's the truth, this Cheerio wasn't just food. It was a Rorschach test for how much whimsy we're willing to indulge, and proof that in the right hands, even a cereal scrap can become a cultural talking point. And honestly, in a world that takes itself too seriously, maybe that's the most important purchase of all. A teddy bear should be the epitome of childhood innocence, soft, comforting, utterly harmless. But listing 28 flipped that notion on its head with a listing for a certifiably cursed stuffed animal named Mr. Whiskers. This wasn't just any plush toy. It was a threadbare, one-eyed bear with what the seller described as a history darker than his matted fur. The description read like a campfire tale designed to haunt your dreams. Previous owner claims he moved from the nursery to the rocking chair nightly. Disembodied giggling reported, last family to own him mysteriously moved houses without him. Priced at $120, the bear came with a handwritten care guide that included instructions like avoid direct eye contact after midnight and offer a teaspoon of honey weekly to appease him. Photos showed Mr. Whiskers slumped in a high-backed chair, his single black button eye gleaming under flash photography, while the other socket hung empty, lost in the great toy purge of 2012, according to the seller. A close-up of his stitched mouth seemed to suggest a sinister grin, though that might have just been the power of suggestion working overtime. The seller leaned hard into the narrative, claiming the bear had been rescued from an estate sale where the homeowner whispered, "He chooses his people," before handing it over. Whether that detail was embellished or not hardly mattered. It was storytelling gold. The comments section became a battleground of believers and skeptics. One person asked, "Does the curse cover shipping insurance, or is that on me?" Another shared an unnerving anecdote about their aunt's vengeful porcelain doll, which allegedly knocked over family photos whenever it felt ignored. But the real spectacle was the flood of direct messages from would-be buyers. A paranormal investigator offered to document Mr. Whiskers' activity for their podcast. A horror movie prop collector saw it as the perfect addition to their haunted set pieces. And then there was the person who simply wrote, "My cat hates him. I need him." What makes this listing so mesmerizing isn't just the campy horror, it's how it weaponizes nostalgia against us. A teddy bear is supposed to be safe, a relic of bedtime stories and scraped knees. By twisting that icon into something menacing, the seller tapped into our deepest cognitive dissonance. It's why dolls and clowns freak us out. They take the familiar and render it unsettling. Mr. Whiskers wasn't just a bear, he was a psychological experiment wrapped in faux fur. And the twist, he sold within hours. The buyer's review was chillingly succinct. Arrived with his head turned backward. 10 out of 10 for accuracy. Whether that was staged or not, the lesson was clear. On Facebook Marketplace, even fear is collectible. Because in the end, we don't buy haunted objects for the ghosts. We buy them for the thrill of wondering, what if just this once the story's true? And with Mr. Whiskers glaring one-eyed from a shelf somewhere, that question lingers like a nursery rhyme you can't quite shake. The final listing in our tour of Facebook Marketplace absurdity might just be the ultimate test of what people will try to sell: a used napkin. Not a vintage handkerchief, not a collectible linen, but a crumpled, slightly stained paper napkin listed for $6 as a pre-loved mealtime memento. The seller's description danced between satire and sincerity. This napkin has absorbed the essence of countless meals: Taco Tuesday, a romantic spaghetti dinner gone wrong, at least one existential crisis over leftovers. Stains may include traces of salsa, tears, or marinara-based revelations. Photos showed the napkin artfully draped over the edge of a plate, its wrinkles and splotches lit like abstract brushstrokes in a modern art exhibit. What makes this listing so fascinating isn't just the item itself, it's the psychological tightrope the seller walked. Were they mocking marketplace culture by reducing commerce to its most disposable form? Or had they genuinely convinced themselves that someone, somewhere, would pay for the privilege of owning another person's discarded mess? The comments section became a battleground of interpretations. One person quipped, "Does it come with a certificate of authenticity or just a food safety warning?" Another demanded to know if the stains were organic, free-range emulsions or just ketchup. But the real twist came when someone tagged their friend with, "This is your chance to own a piece of someone else's shame." The seller's responses only deepened the mystery. When asked why anyone would buy a used napkin, they doubled down. "You don't buy the napkin, you buy the story." This napkin has lived. They even offered to provide custom stain interpretations for an extra fee, claiming they could read the grease patterns like tea leaves to tell your fortune. Suddenly, this wasn't just trash, it was performance art masquerading as commerce. Or maybe it was commerce masquerading as performance art. The line had never been blurrier. And then, in true marketplace fashion, the unpredictable happened. The napkin sold. No dramatic bidding war, no ironic collector's review, just a terse, sold notification that left everyone wondering whether the buyer was a conceptual artist, a troll, or someone who genuinely believed in the napkin's mystical grease stains. This listing didn't just cap off our ridiculous countdown, it encapsulated the entire bizarre ecosystem of online selling. At its core, every marketplace transaction is about perceived value, and value is just a story we agree to believe in. Whether it's a haunted hairbrush or a vintage paperclip, the object itself is irrelevant. What matters is the narrative we drape over it, like a stained napkin on a dinner plate. So the next time you crumple up a napkin, ask yourself, are you throwing away trash or are you discarding a potential $6 story? On Facebook Marketplace, the answer depends entirely on how boldly you're willing to lie to yourself and how many strangers are willing to play along. Because in the end, the most ridiculous listings aren't about the items at all. They're about us and our endless, audacious hunger to believe that even the most worthless things might just be worth something. And there you have it, 29 listings that prove Facebook Marketplace is less of a flea market and more of a fever dream. From haunted hairbrushes to half-eaten bags of chips, these posts aren't just bizarre. They're a testament to the unshakable human belief that everything has value if you're creative enough to invent it. Think about it. Someone looked at a used Q-tip and thought, this isn't trash, it's a narrative waiting to happen. Another held up a rock and declared it the perfect pet. These aren't just sales attempts, they're acts of wild, delusional optimism, fueled by the eternal hope that somewhere out there, a stranger will nod and say, you know what? I see the vision, but let's be real, most of these listings aren't about the items at all. They're about the stories we attach to them. A rusty paperclip becomes a vintage office relic because nostalgia is a powerful markup tool. A wilted houseplant transforms into a low-commitment companion because we're all desperate for metaphors that make our struggles sound poetic. Even the cursed teddy bear isn't really selling fear. It's selling the thrill of wondering what if, of inviting a little chaos into a world that's otherwise painfully predictable. Facebook Marketplace isn't just a platform, it's a stage for the theater of absurdity where every listing is a tiny performance art piece waiting for an audience. So why does any of this matter? Because buried under the layers of humor and sheer audacity, there's a fascinating truth about human nature. We're storytellers by instinct, turning even the most mundane objects into vessels for meaning. A jar of countryside air isn't just oxygen, it's escapism in glass form. A single Cheerio isn't breakfast debris, it's a minimalist manifesto. And in a world where we're drowning in stuff, maybe the real skill isn't decluttering, but reframing our junk as someone else's treasure. Now it's your turn. Have you stumbled upon a listing that made you question reality? Maybe a shoelace marketed as a pre-loved serpent or a toaster that claims to whisper affirmations. Drop your favorite finds in the comments because the beauty of Facebook Marketplace isn't just in the listings, It's in the collective disbelief and delight they inspire. And who knows, maybe your screenshot of a lightly haunted coffee mug will be the next viral masterpiece. After all, in the grand bazaar of the absurd, there's always room for one more delusion. Sorry, visionary. Happy scrolling, and may your marketplace adventures be as gloriously weird as the human imagination itself.